Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Mormon Atheist. All right, guys, today I got a good show for you. Today we're going to, let me get my camera straight here. We're bouncing all over the place. All right. Today we're going to talk about yet another book. Um, at Apostate Congregation, welcome. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Today we're going to talk about another book. We're going to try to connect some of these dots, okay? And I want to emphasize on the importance of when you read this stuff, like, you have to remember what you've read in other books, right? And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some evidence that backs up what the Mormon atheist is even saying or talking about or anything of that sort, because you have to remember, apostates, the entire point of this channel is we take the Mormon story that, I am a born and raised Mormon, right? I was born in the cult. So I grew up with these stories, okay? The Joseph Smith story, the Sally Chase story, the Mormon War story, the list goes on. You all know these stories, right? So we grew up, and very much in the church. A lot of the teachings in Sunday school and all of this stuff is more or less confirming within the church these stories, right? And how they're faith promoting, and all of these things. The stories have been altered, like to be faith promoting. That's like hands down the best way to describe my entire channel, is these stories that we grew up with have been altered. I'm gonna have to rewind it myself because now I don't even remember what I just said, right? But that's good though. I will rewind that. So anyways, as we go on, we back to the book. All right, I completely lost my train of thought. So back to the book. That's what this channel's about, right? There we go. That's what I was talking about. That's what this channel is about, is we take those Mormon stories, right, that we grew up with, and we take outside source material, okay? What non-Mormon sources means, what that means, right, is a Mormon, an LDS person, their allegiance is to the church, first and foremost. No government, no flag, no nothing. Their allegiance, first and foremost, is to the church, right? That is why we do not use Mormon sources, because those very people are the ones that change it. They alter the story to promote, the faith promoting story, right? Version of the story. So the outside source is actually telling you the real story of what's, what the story is, right? So the Mormon story that we all know is an answer to what the story is, right? And so books are being written, pamphlets, articles, magazines, manuscripts, all kinds of stuff are being written. There's literally thousands. So anybody that tells you, I doubt there's this many books, I doubt there, this was a profound movement of the day, the Mormon movement. This was profound. Everybody's talking about it. It's in the newspapers, it's in the anti-masonics, it's everywhere. The book that I'm about to talk about tonight, well, this morning, I guess, by the way, today is July 20th, 2025, okay? I got to get that in there because I know. Yeah, so anyway, so we can reference back to say the date. All right, anyway, so the book I'm actually talking about right now, is the guy was a naturalist, okay? He has nothing at all to do with Mormonism whatsoever, right? He was a naturalist, and he got stuck with the Mormons for the winter. So the first half of his book is really all about nature, and it's stunning. It's incredible. But there are things that are mentioned in the first half of the book, because in the second half of the book he refers back to those events. So you have to pay attention, even though the first half isn't directly about Mormonism. The events that he's talking about later on become significant in Mormonism, and he says that. See, that's the fun thing with reading these history books, is you can see how the story progresses. Okay, this book is called Gleaning by the Way. Okay, Gleaning, Gleaning, by the way. Gleaning by the Way by John A. Clark. And he wrote this book, it was published in 1842. Okay, so just the chapters, you can just read the chapters of the books themselves, and they talk about, like, they speak for themselves, right? Okay, so one of the important thing that for maybe the last 4 of my videos, right? Maybe, yeah, probably the last 4 videos have all been books written during the time that Joseph Smith is still alive. So that's very profound, because they're telling you the story, right? And then you can go to the church's websites, and you can compare that same exact story. And in a lot of cases on the church website, the stories are changed. The names are altered. The dates are altered. People are added to it. People are taken away from it. Parts of the story have just been completely removed. Parts have been added to it. But you can physically see this with your own eyes, right? And so the thing is I know they go through and they watch a lot of these videos, and they change, like the church themselves today. They'll go through and change stuff on their websites to conform to, the other podcasts and all this kind of stuff, right? That's known. They do that all the time. It's known, right? Some of the other podcasters, they legit have to resort to taking screenshots of everything before they podcast on it, because it immediately gets changed or removed or whatever, right? And those are the more famous, well, I wouldn't say famous, popular podcasters, right? So, you have to, if they're doing that today, why wouldn't they do that back then? Why wouldn't they, because back then they were just getting started at it, right? It was, as these things came about, they would change or alter whatever story for their faith promoting purposes, right? It's propaganda. This is complete propaganda, right? And so you can go back in these old books, and you can read these old books, and you can actually compare the old books themselves to each other, right? And a lot of them are saying the same thing, which we're going to do later on. Once I get towards the end, we're going to talk about some actual Mormon sources, Mormon books that back up what I'm saying, that were written in the day, right? So, I mean, I could do this all day. I could do this every single day, all day long, 24/7. There are thousands of these books. I mean, you literally just pick one. This guy is a naturalist. John Clark, he's a naturalist. Nothing to do with Mormon. I back that up. He's going around. So what he's doing in his book is he's a naturalist, and he's a religious writer. So he's going around writing about various religions and nature, right? And so and he gets stuck with the Mormons for the winter, and he writes about it. And so it's pretty profound, because a lot of the Mormon stories that and you hear are in these old books, but they're not what you think they are. They're not like the Mormon side of the story, the LDS version. If you go on their websites, they take away the sentiment of of like the meaning of what the author is even talking about, right? They remove that completely, right? And so then it kind of becomes up to interpretation. But when you read the books in context, it's very clear. The Mormon War, right? The Utah becoming a state, right? All these stuffs, you can look this stuff up. You can Google all of it. You can Google it. And so, right? So you know, these books are telling you the story, and I've had some conversations lately that just really kind of irk me, man, because like when you're so cognitively dissident, right? And the circular argument of, yeah, they could have said that. There was a lot of Smiths. Smiths was a common name in the day, right? Okay, but when you're reading this stuff in context, okay, it's hard to deny. You can't deny it. You can argue all you want to, but it's like the age-old thing. Unless if I read it, okay, let me give you an example. Here's an example. You read a book, okay? You know what that book says, right? You know that book. Now, you've read that book 10 times. Even if you've read it twice, okay? You know what that book says, right? Now, you go to one of your friends and you say, hey, man, I read this book. It was so fascinating. And your friend says, oh, yeah, I read that same book. Do you remember the part in chapter 8 and you're looking at the guy like, what the fuck are you talking about? And your buddy is going to argue to the death that in chapter 8, he knows. But you're looking at that guy like, dude, I mean, that's nowhere in that book. Like, I have no idea what you're even talking about. But your friend's not going to back down. He's going to argue. That's what's happening here, okay? Unless you actually read these books, your argument is flat. You have no argument because you literally do not know what you're talking about. And then when you connect all these dots and when you start putting all this stuff together and you start realizing, wow, none of this stuff matches. Why? But then when you go back in history and you read the stories in 1842, remember, I stay as close to Joseph Smith as I can. You have to remember that, right? And so there's a very clear story being told here, right? And it's hard to accept. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've read stuff and I've just been like, what? Like, because I grew up with these stories. And so just, even though I'm the Mormon atheist and I'm like all this stuff, like this is still a cult, you understand? This stuff is ingrained in my essence. It's who I am, right? My entire family is LDS. I was born in this cult. I'm 48 years old. Okay? My entire family. So this is ingrained in me. It's instilled in me. And so when I personally read this stuff, it actually has an effect on me. I mean, if you like, if you're an ex-Mormon, how did it feel when you became? See, I'm getting cold chills now talking about it because it's so profound. It's life-changing. It's earth-shattering. It's faith-shattering. It's all these things, right? But then at the same time, I look at my family, or you look at your family, and you're thinking, dude, this is what you believe. Like, you read the Book of Mormon, and it's just such a generic story, right? And you're just like, seriously? Like, But unless you read the stuff, you're never going to know. You're just kind of talking shit, really, in your arguments, right? Is all you're really doing. Even if you're against Mormonism. If you're against Mormon, you got to come up with something other than, the Mormons fucked me. It's the same thing I say about the Bible. If you don't believe in the Bible, why? Why don't you got to come up with something other than, the Christians fuck me. No, fuck you. Give me a reason, okay? Same thing with Mormonism. Same exact thing, right? Okay. So in my last video, right, I talked about a book called Mormonism Portrayed, okay? And in that book, right, so this is part of the conversation that I had with somebody. And, all right, let's go back. Let's stay on John Clark Gleaning, by the way, right? Because there is a point here that I do want to make when it comes to these books, right? You have to remember these books are written in the 1800s. This is pre-Civil War stuff, people. Okay, and also it's in the Indian Wars and these sorts of things, right? Okay, I really want to like give you a warning, okay, like content warning. These books are brutal, okay? When it comes to the treatment of each other, uh, the whites and the Indians and the whites, the French, because you got to remember that there's no Louisiana Purchase yet. The United States stops at the Missouri River. So the French are doing stuff, the Spaniards are doing stuff, the whites, the Irish, like everybody, the Indians, and not even to mention slavery. Okay, the Civil War hasn't happened yet, right? So these books are brutal. They're brutal, and they go into great description on some of this, like scalping. There's a woman that runs, and she was extremely beautiful and like the fair lady of the town, and the Indians grabbed her and straight up scalped her and took her husband because they wanted the husband for a slave. This kind of stuff is what's in these books, okay? And I have to, when you read these things and you read like what's happening to the Indians, right? You can't, I don't know, man. You can't help but, I mean, can you blame the Indians, right? No. No way, man. These people are invading their land and they're like, what is this? And they try to help them and they end up screwing the Indians try to help the, newcomers, and just every chance they got screwed over. And so there's no trust. It's just insane. This is like an insane period of time. The anti-masonic movement's going on. Like there's a lot of stuff happening in these books, right? And you can't dismiss that. So when people are like, oh, they could have meant, yeah, they must have meant. No, print of the day, the written word of the day was like the social media, right? Everybody's getting all this stuff out. But the difference here is what I'm looking at everything. And you can pretty much tell when something is propaganda, all right? When something is anti this or anti that, you can tell by the writing style, because you read enough of this and you get to actually know the writing styles, right? Of how these people are writing, their words, how they're talking, their slang. It's fascinating, right? It's so fascinating. But you got to follow the names, the dates, and so apostates. In the book that I'm reading, well, actually, I just got done reading it, and I haven't talked about it yet because I just got done with it this morning, right? And it's not a very long one. It's let's see the title is very long, but the book itself is not long. All right, so the name of this other book that I'm talking about, right, is it's an official United States government document. It's a government document, okay? So the name of this, and you can go on archive.org. I want you guys to write down this name. If you know, write down this name. Whenever I'm done, you can go look it up and you can read it for yourself. You can get it on archive.org is where you can get it, right? I believe it's 47 pages long. Okay, so the name of this book is called Document Showing the Testimony Given Before the Judge of the Fifth Judicial Circuit of the State of Missouri on the trial of Joseph Smith Jr. and others for high treason and other crimes against the state, February 18th, 1841. Now, here's the importance with that date, though. This trial takes place in 1838. 1838. In the Mormon story, that's very important, okay? This document is published in 1841. That's why it says February 18th, 1841. The trial did not take place in 1841. The trial took place in 1838, and it gives you the date. It's a government document, so it gives you the everything, right? Okay, so the significance of that book and why I'm actually talking about it on this episode in particular, about gleaning by the way, right, is how you can connect the dots, correlate the books, read this stuff. That's 47 pages long. Okay, Mormonism Portrayed, that book is like 54 pages long, because that particular book is the 54 pages is all we have. The rest is lost. I would really love to know what's in the rest of that book, because those 54 pages are stunning. Stunning. And so you can read this stuff in a day, in a couple of hours. And just those two alone. Okay, and I got a couple others right now I'm going to talk about. Okay. They what's the word? They confirm each other, right? Okay, so now I'm going to give you some Mormon sources. Here's some Mormon sources that the Mormon atheist never does. Never. Okay, but in this, I just want to show you how you can prove this stuff. You can either prove it or disprove it. Whatever area of interest, the Mormon War, Mountain Meadow Massacre, whatever you want, you have to take the Mormon story, because you got to know the story, right? So you go look at the Mormon websites. You read the Mormon of the day of whatever you're looking at, right? Don't read contemporary or modern stuff, because they're writing about these books. I'm not interested in what somebody in today's world has to say about this book, Gleaning by the Way. I'm not interested. I want my own opinion. What is it? What does the book say? I'm a grown-up. I can read. I know how to use my own judgment, my own thoughts, my own faculties, reason, right? Okay, you know, I don't need to mansplain you a freaking book, right? But apparently some of these people, you do. You got to hold their hand. And then they get pissed off because you're holding their hand. And it's like, well, dude, you're not opening your eyes. You're not listening. You're not reasoning, right? You're this circular argument, cognitive dissonance, right? It's got to be true. Joseph Smith has to be real, right? Okay. Or the whole thing falls apart. You know, like I said in the previous video, look up Aziel. See if you can find Aziel in outside Mormon sources. And I think I misspoke, by the way, in that video. I said Mulek, and it's actually Zedekiah. Zedekiah. So, yeah. Anyways, Okay, where was I? All right, so the document showing the testimony given before the judge of the Fifth Judicial Circuit Court, and fifth is spelled out, by the way. It's not 5th. Circuit of the state of Missouri on the trial of Joseph Smith Jr. and others for high treason and other crimes against the state. Okay, February 18th, 1841. Now, that book, okay, that is a government document. Those people are under oath. Is there some lying going on? I will leave it up to you to decide on. You use your own. I'm just introducing the book. You use your own judgment, apostates, right? That's what it's an interactive channel. I mean, that's, you know. So there's another book that I have not spoke about. That's called Rocky Mountain Saints. Okay. I forgot to look up the author. This portion of what I'm talking about right now, like literally I just wrote down before I came on here. So Rocky Mountain Saints, Steinhaus or Stenhouse or something like that is who the book is by. Okay. These court documents, Rocky Mountain Saints is another Mormon source, right? That's a Mormon source. William Smith's book on Mormonism, that's a Mormon source, okay? What are the significance of these books? Why would the Mormon atheists bring up Mormon sources? It's because of what they're talking about in those books. William Smith on Mormonism, that book is only, you know, like 50 pages long or something like that. And right off the gate, he tells you about how the Articles of Incorporation are the Church of Christ in 1830, right? Okay, the Church of Christ, their Book of Mormon is touted as the first Book of Mormon. It says it on the cover page, 1833 was the published date. Okay, so you have to add these things up, right? You have to add this stuff up, right? You have to connect these dots. What is the story I'm being told when I go to Sunday school, when I go to priesthood, right? When I go get married in the temple? What does that mean? What are those oaths I'm taking, right? Okay, so you got to add up these clues, right? Mormonism portrayed, right? These are evidence. This is evidence, right? Because this stuff is backing up what I'm saying. And those are your own Mormon sources that are literally backing up what I am saying. That's my point with those sources, right? The Church of Christ. What does the Church of Christ have to do with William Morgan, right? Okay, well, it just so happens that in that document the document showing the testimony, there's a reference to Morgan's widow in that document. The widow Morgan. She goes to Lyman White's house, and he has a bed that belonged to her husband. The bastard's sleeping in William Morgan's bed. You understand? You know, I mean, the stuff is insane. You got to tie these things together, connect these dots, man. The widow Morgan is Lucinda Pendleton. That's who the widow Morgan is, right? And he describes there's a couple of cups that she takes, and she's mentioned a few times in that document. Okay, so you know you have to, and that is a court document. So you have to, apostates. It's so important that you connect these dots when you read these things, and you observe the circular argument. Okay, you know, just be aware of it, right? That's out there. And so when you're doing your research, you know what, apostates, okay, I am very well aware that this is YouTube, okay? I encourage you on every single one of my episodes to fact check me. Every one of my episodes, I encourage you. I want you to fact check me. The reason why is because you're going to find stuff. You're going to find what I'm talking about. You can look up the books, you can look up all that, you can read it for yourself, make your own judgment. But the books, they talk about so much more stuff, right? And you know, you're going to find that stuff also. Maybe the first vision is your interest. You know, did you know in the early days, Joseph's first vision, when he's describing how it like comes down in a fire and all this stuff, that is the same exact vision that Lehi had. Coincidental, huh? You know, I mean, you have to know the stories. You have to read the Book of Mormon to know what the hell Lehi even is. Who is Nephi? What is his significance? Who is Laban? Why is there a sword of Laban in Mormonism? Right? You have to think about this stuff, apostates. Connect the dots. There's so many stories on William Morgan and how Lodom Lawson, Daniel Wells, Newell K. Knightley, like all these people are at the Morgan trials. All of these people are on trial for the kidnapping of William Morgan, right? These are T.F. Talbot, right? All of these people have something to do. And then all of a sudden, Joseph has a first vision. The anti-masonic movement pops up. People are pissed. Joseph has to move. There's mobs, all this stuff. And then you find these little clues in these other books that complete the story. They're just little clues. Sometimes they're one sentence, like the Widow Morgan. It's like 3 sentences in the entire story. And it's a side mention. It's just a complete side mention. Unless you're paying attention, when you read these books and you're not thinking about the Church of Christ, if you're not thinking about William Morgan, Lucinda Pendleton, these clues, you're missing it. You are missing it. You're missing it. Okay? And then all of a sudden, this Mormon movement pops up. Joseph has a vision, right? If you look at where Morgan was kidnapped, and if you look at all of these locations, you know, you can look at this stuff on a map. Just Google map it. Just look it up on Google Maps and look at how the locations of Batavia and Canandaigua and, you know, the jail, and like they're a stone's throw away from each other, right? And Eli Bruce, and you know, these correlations, right? I mean, the more I look into this and the more I read and the more I study on this stuff, the more obvious it just flatly and plainly becomes to me that there is something here. My videos stand. I stand by my videos, every one of them. I stand by them. And if you watch from video number 1 to today, you can see because I'm learning also. I don't know this. I've never heard of Gleaning, by the way. Are you kidding me? Who's ever heard of that book? But if you want to go to the apologetic side, and if you Google this book, Gleaning, by the way, right? Because I Google the authors, right? There's not a lot of information that comes up on this guy, but there's a lot of Mormon sources on this guy. And the stuff that they say, these are scholars. You can Google it and you can read their papers. You can read what they're writing about this book. It has nothing, what they're writing has nothing at all to do with what this book is actually about. Nothing. They misquote stuff in the book. They take things out of context, and you can read it. You can go there on the website, and you can look at it and you can read it for yourself. And then you can read the book, and it's so incredibly different. You're like, what the hell is this guy talking about? That's not at all what this book is saying. But then here's 15 other books that back up what this guy's saying. Do you understand what that means, apostates? You have the real historical story, and then you have the church's propaganda fabricated story. That is an answer to all of these other stories. So a lot of the stuff really did happen, you know, like a lot of it did happen, you know, so, but you can tell this through the sentiment and the context of all these old books, everybody's questioning. Like, I mean, first of all, they call him an imposter. Like everybody calls him an imposter. Joseph Smith, right? Nobody believes the story. As a first, yeah, BS, right? The whole thing is BS, right? They go to Charles Anton. They tell you the story of Charles Anton. And then there's the Mormon story of Charles Anton, right? So you have to connect these dots. You have to go to outside sources. What is the point of reading a book about the author is a lifelong dedicated LDS member, and they're writing a historical book? What kind of real history are you going to get out of that? You're going to get the Mormon story, right? So all of these people, you know, like I really question, because Sandra Tanner, Bushman, literally everybody, all of them, like what are they talking about? Because when you read these books, the stuff that those people are writing about is not even close to what the real historical story is, right? And it's mind-blowing, because these people are touted as like ex-Mormons, they were excommunicated, but they're telling you that Sandra Tanner, the church releases all of, think about this, apostates. This is from a cultic perspective, okay? The church, the cult, releases a bunch of new information. Okay, well, first of all, the church doesn't release anything for no reason. You understand? This is a cult. They're not going to just put some shit out there. You know what I'm saying? Did some stuff get in that shouldn't have been? Maybe. I don't know. But my point being, the cult released papers. She took those papers and went through them. Yeah, she found a bunch of weird stuff. She found a bunch of, but overall, she never says like, this is just a bunch of horse shit, and here's the reason why. Never. None of these people do. But these authors in the 1800s do. And ever since these books have been written, you can follow the story year by year by year. 1840, 1841, 1842, the story changes, and you can follow the story. You can literally follow the story on how it changes. And then you take that same story and you go to the church's website and you say, okay, well, this is the first time that they mentioned this story that I can find in outside sources. So let's go to the church and see what the church says about the story. Lo and behold, it's something that came out after the book. And then that story is what keeps getting repeated and repeated and repeated and compounded on and altered and changed. You see, you can see it. You can literally see it if you read enough of these. If you just read one, just read one. Just read the ones I talked about right now. Just read those. Take the commonalities, compare them. Take the commonalities of what those books say. They're only 50 some pages long, the three of those. Go to the church's story and see what the churches say. And then here's another twist. This will really mess you up. Who is John E. Page? John E. Page. I'm going to give you guys a rabbit hole. I want you guys to look up John E. Page, John Ebenezer. I'll give you a little hint. Ebenezer Page. John Ebenezer Page. Find out who that guy is. And then go back to the William Smith book. This is fascinating stuff, apostates. I'm not joking you when I'm telling you, right? None of this stuff is my opinion. This is not my opinion. This is what we're staying true to these texts. We're staying true. This is what the book says in 1840, in 1841. This is what the milieu, the people are saying. The governors, the politicians, the anti-masons, the naturalist, John Clark, right? And you can go back and you can compare these stories, and it's absolutely fascinating. But it's a crazy, unique look into Americana, early Americana. If you're fascinated, if you like history, you will love these books, because these books paint such a vivid picture of just what it would have been like in the 1800s along the Missouri River. I mean, the descriptions of these things are just like, God, I just want to close my eyes and just be like, oh, kick back with a piece of straw sticking out of my mouth, and just, have some bathtub gin, I don't know, but, it's just fascinating stuff, apostates. So I really want you to, do your due diligence, fact check me and all this stuff, right? Come to your own conclusions. I leave nothing. I do not put my opinion on. I do have my opinions. My opinion very much leads towards the Masons killed William Morgan for releasing the secrets of the Church of Masonry, which David Brainerd says in his book. He says that in his book, right? One thing, you have to read these prefaces. If you do not read the preface of these books, because the preface is the intent. Why is the author writing these books? You have to read that, because it gives context to the entire book. If you don't read the preface, you are missing the entire point of the book. Okay, hands down. There's I'll argue that to the death. Hands down. Read the preface. Okay. Anyways, the Church of Masonry, right? Well, who facilitated the Masons? The Church of Christ did. The Church of Christ did in 1827. The entire anti-Masonic movement is based on what happened to William Morgan. Solomon Southwick and Thurlow Weed created the anti-Masonic movement as a direct result of what happened to William Morgan. That's fact. Okay. So you take that into context, and who are these people that they're talking about? All those names in Solomon Southwick's books, in David Brainerd's books, in Thurlow Weed's books, in everybody, any anti-Masonic book, any one of them, pick one that's of the day, just pick one. They talk about it. They say names. They name names. Those names are the names that me and you know today as the founders and creators of the Mormon Church. Every single one of them have something to do with the creation story, the foundation story of Mormonism. Every one of them do. And you can fact check me. Look up Solomon Southwick's A Warning Against Masonry. I do several videos on it. And read the book. I encourage you, read the book. It's 146 pages long. It came out in 1827. And then read David Brainerd's book, Light on Masonry. You got to read the prefaces. You have to read the prefaces. Okay. So Yeah, this is important. Connect the dots. I firmly believe Solomon Southwick says, Thurlow Weed says, a lot of anti-Masonic books say Smith from Vermont is either the killer or the presumed killer of Morgan. William Morgan's wife later ends up being Joseph Smith's wife, Lucinda Pendleton. Joseph Smith and William Morgan's story are so incredibly similar that if I was to write both of their stories down on a piece of paper and remove their names and hand you those stories and say, tell me which one is which, I guarantee you, you could not do it. You could not do it. That is how similar their stories are. Like, I'm not joking. That's how similar their stories are. And so it's fascinating. That is a question, right? I'm looking for the smoking gun, the crossover, right? That's what I'm looking for, is that crossover. When does, that's what I want to know. 1830 is a strong date, but like, that's when they get full religious freedom, is in 1830, right? It's great stuff. And you would know what I mean by that statement, the religious freedom, when you read these anti-Masonic books, they're talking about the politics of the day, right? Of the 1820s. And there's politics in this stuff. There's everything. It's so fascinating. Like, it covers everything. And the Mormons, you got to hand it to the Mormon movement, right? Was they created a lot of the West, right? They discovered the gold rush. The minor 49er was a frickin' Mormon. Yeah, that took me a second to digest that. But it says it in several books, so like it must be true, it says it. Like, I do actually believe a lot of stuff that's being said, because this is history. They're talking about history. This is history, apostates. And 98, 99% of the stuff they talk about, it you can actually Google, and you can look it up, and no shit, it's there. There it is, right? They talk about books, they talk about authors, they talk about this, they talk about Google, all that stuff, and do your own research in whatever it is. H.H. Bancroft, I showed you on the last one, and this was actually part of the argument that I was talking about earlier, was this guy kept dismissing these as like, yeah, how do they know? How do they know? And it's like, dude, H.H. Bancroft, in his book, History of Utah, it's written like an encyclopedia. It'll have a page or a paragraph or even a couple of sentences. And then the entire rest of it is sources that describe whatever he's talking about in that paragraph or whatever, right? In the History of Utah by H.H. Bancroft, in that book, he has 52 pages of references, and you can look every one of them up, all of them. Some of them don't even exist anymore. Some of them are lost to time, but you can Google it and it's there. It's really there. And he wrote that book in 1889. B.H. Roberts, his book was an answer to H.H. Bancroft's book. Okay, so B.H. Roberts is an answer to H.H. Bancroft. Okay, you have to realize that kind of stuff, that this is what's happening, right? And so when you read these books in chronological order like that, the dates, you can see the story progress on both sides. You can see the Mormon story progress, and then these books are start to be written in a way of this is what the story was. Now here's the new story. So these books are calling out these changes as well, right? But you got to pay attention. You know, see, when I read these books, apostates, this book, Gleaning, by the way, that I'm talking about today, right, by John A. Clark in 1842. I forgot what I was saying. Anyways, yeah, it's great stuff, man. It's so fascinating. I love reading these books, and it just goes on, and the muse is taking me to the truth, right? This is the truth. My logo is the Eye of Horus, right? That's what we're looking for, is the Eye of Horus. Truth. Okay. I want to know what the real story is. I grew up with these stories. Okay. And I don't believe a single one of them. I never have. When I was 9 years old, I got bit. I got stung by the gadfly. And, you know, just, you know, when I got baptized at 8 years old, I kicked and screamed the whole time. Like I hated it. I had to give this stupid talk about stealing. It was just dumb. I mean, it was so dumb. You know, I hated it. You know, when I was like 12, I asked why Jesus is white, if he's from the Middle East. You know, when I was like 13, I was like, hey, those are the Mayan pyramids. In church, in church, I did that, right? Yeah, I hated church, man. I hated it. I was truly an apostate. I was a true apostate, and I'm so proud to be an apostate and glad. You know, say it loud, apostate. Yeah, apostate congregation. I'm a very proud apostate. And through that, I have been reading these sources because I want to know why. I want to know why my family, right? Why does my family look at me the way they look at me? Other than obvious reasons. Why do they look at you the way they look at you? Why? You know, because you don't conform, you don't believe, you're not buying what they're selling, right? So your best weapon is knowledge. It's not hate. It's not discrimination. It's not screaming and yelling, or it's not distance. Knowledge is your weapon, man. Read on a very minimum, on a very minimum, just read the Book of Mormon. Just read it. So you know what your parents are trying to shove down your throat. And then you can come back at them and say, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt, Uncle, whatever, right? Bishop. And point out the inconsistencies that are in the book itself. Right? You can do this. And then a lot of these Mormon stories that you hear about Sidney Rigdon and Martin Harris, a lot of this stuff will actually start to make sense to you, which compiles your argument. It's all bullshit, man. Why are you shoving this down my throat? And you know, the political angle of all of this, right, is that all on its own, the angle of politics. Why was the Mormons being, the whole persecution story? What is that even all about, right? They're being persecuted because the townspeople don't like them voting in blocks, and they're being like, they're starting an army, they're creating treason. That book I gave you, the document, that's on the treason that I'm talking about, right? So they're doing all this anti-government stuff because their agenda is very clear in everything, literally everything. It doesn't matter, Mormon, non-Mormon, it does not matter what source you choose. Their agenda is to infiltrate the government and to take over politics. That was the whole Masonic movement, right? The anti-Masonic movement, right? That's what these things are all about. You got to connect these dots, right? And they're being, and so the church changes the stories as persecution. Well, no, it's not. You read these stories. You know, the story about how the woman had to go out in the field and they burned all the houses down and the army came in and all that stuff. Well, the real stories in these books. Those people were what's the word, like fanatics. They were fanatical, right? If Joseph asked them to do anything, they do it, hands down, because there was punishment if you didn't do it. And it even says in here, the woman in that story is in this book saying, I would have done it regardless, because Joseph said. So you got to take these things into consideration, folks. You can't say this guy that wrote this book is wrong when 15, 20, 30, 80, 100, 1,000 other books, articles, newspapers, pamphlets, manuscripts, the list goes on, also say the same thing. And then you have the Mormon story. That's similar, but different. It's either painted in a prophetic light, like this new revelation, or it's faith promoting. No matter what you want to look at it, it's a bullshit story. And then you go back to history and you say, okay, wow, history is telling me this. These authors that have nothing at all to do with Mormonism are writing about the same stuff the church is saying. But the church is an answer to their book. It's an answer to their book. Okay? This stuff is fascinating as hell, people. You just have to, you know, the biggest underestimation that anybody on this planet can make is the underestimation of the Mormon Church. Their entire program, the entire organization, coming from the 33rd Scottish Rite all the way to today, their agenda is to make you one of them without you ever knowing it. That is the agenda, and it says it throughout all the stuff. That's their agenda. Take over the government, take over politics, make the United States a theocracy. Well, they've succeeded in Utah, right? Utah is a theocracy, right? So that is their agenda, right? That's not even like a question. And that sounds crazy, but that's in the books. It's in the books. It's not my opinion. It's in the books. Okay. He's on trial for treason. Okay. You freaking meatballs, and you're going to argue with me? Come on. Come on, be reasonable, all right? Just be reasonable. Okay. So you have to connect these dots and use your reason. I mean, freaking think about this shit, man. You know, why are they mentioning the widow Morgan in 1841 going to get her husband's bed out of Lyman White's house? Okay. All right, apostate congregation. I have talked long enough. My mouth is getting dry. It's 6 in the morning. I want to go drink some coffee. So, yes, I am an apostate. You should be proud. Stand up and say you're a freaking apostate, man. Because we are the people. We are William Morgan. William Morgan died for releasing the secrets of the Church of Masonry. The Church of Masonry is the LDS Church. He died for that. And in every one of these books, every one of them, it doesn't matter which one, it doesn't matter. They're all warning you. You better stop this now, because it's going to get so big. They're going to take over your government. They're going to take over your politics, and you can't stop it. You will not be able to stop it. In 1827, they're telling us this. In 1827, okay? In 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 30, 2025, they're all telling you this. You better stop this now. And that is why William Morgan died. It wasn't the handshakes. His book was not finished, people. His book was not finished. David Brainerd, if you read the preface, finishes William Morgan's book. Okay? Connect the dots. These are clues. They're clues. Put together the clues. Okay? You got to put together the clues. Joseph Smith, in my mind, killed William Morgan. 100%, hands down. The reason I say that is because of the names. You cannot dismiss those names. You can't. In that context, in that group of people, in that time, compared to the Mormon story that we know that's taking place at that time, you cannot dismiss that. And it's hidden in plain sight, a classic Masonic move. An occultist will never look at religion. Religion will never look at the occults. But what happens if the religion they're talking about is a cult? You understand? Apostates, like and subscribe to the channel. We are William Morgan. It is our duty now to read these books and stay true to these sources. You do not interpret, you do not put your opinion. Okay, you very well, once you read this stuff, you will very well form an opinion. Absolutely. But you've got to stay true to the source. These LDS historians, these LDS scholars are writing about these books. So bypass the middleman and go to the source. What does the source say? That's what we do on this channel. Okay. Like and subscribe to the channel, Apostate Congregation. Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me your time. I beg, I plead, I fact check me. Look up these sources, please. Okay, you will find stuff. Okay, this channel is not monetized. It never will be monetized. So the only way that you can support the Mormon Atheist is by watching these videos all the way through. Okay, liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing, all of this stuff. So more people get this word out. And tell your friends, tell your family, share, read the books. You can copy and paste the pages on Facebook, whatever, right? Just, I'm asking for this stuff to get out there because it is so explosive and it is so damn interesting that it's just phenomenal. So thank you. Like and subscribe. We are all William Morgan. We must get the word out. The persecution that was going through them in Missouri, Ohio, Illinois, all of that stuff is because they infiltrated the political system. Look at them today. Our political system is fucked because of these people, right? The temples, they're in everything. Okay. So once again, here we are. Once again, like and subscribe to the channel, Apostate Congregation. Maybe this time the government will actually shut down the Mormon Church. I very seriously doubt it, though. But all right. How have they been around? How have they survived? I just gotta question that. How has this church survived? It has to do with politics. Okay. Like and subscribe, apostates. Goodbye.